The world used to make sense when you could measure it in inches. 50 years I spent at that Singer machine, and every piece of fabric, every needle, every spool of thread behaved exactly how I told it to. Life was clean, tight seams. But lately, nothing worked right. Not the thread, and definitely not me. It started so slow, the kind of sickness they tell you is just 72. That's the way the cookie crumbles, I thought. Just a deep tiredness. Not the kind you sleep off, but the kind that sticks to your bones like Houston humidity. I'd try to walk Buttons, my little poodle, around the block, and halfway through I felt like a balloon running out of air. My chest would get heavy, not pain, just pressure, like someone stacked Frank's old dictionary right on my breastbone. I called it heartburn. Every night after dinner, I'd pop the pink antacids and tell myself I needed less tomato sauce. Women. We get good at explaining away the signs our body gives us. We don't want to be a bother, especially not when your only child already looks at you like you are the biggest burden in his life. Frank died 5 years ago. He was the anchor. Michael, our son, he's a kind boy, but weak, easily swayed by Sarah. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, is the kind of woman who measures everything in dollars, even affection. When Frank was gone, they swooped in. They called it caregiving. I called it suffocation. They live in a small, cramped apartment across town, but they visit my paid-off house on Oak Street every Tuesday and Saturday, regular as church bells. They don't come to talk about Buttons or my dress patterns. They come to check the house, and they come to manage me. Michael started managing my medication schedule. He said, "Mom, you forget things. We need to keep you safe." I never forgot anything. I remembered the exact stitch count on Sarah's wedding dress, even now. But I was tired, and fighting took more energy than I had left. The worst part was the pills. They weren't my regular blood pressure medication. Michael had those locked up, claiming they were too complicated for me. These were new, big white pills he called essential vitamins. He insisted I take one every morning and always watched me swallow it down with a glass of tap water. That's when the clock started ticking backward. The day after I took one of those big white pills, the symptoms would hit like a wave. The deep fatigue, the kind where lifting my head felt like lifting a bowling ball, and the cold sweats, even when the house was warm. I'd lie on the sofa clutching Buttons, feeling chilled and clammy. Michael would look at me and shake his head with a pitying fake sigh. "See, Mom, you look awful. We need to handle everything for you," Sarah chirped last week. She was looking at the house documents Michael had spread out on my kitchen counter. They were property tax statements and refinancing forms. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the equity locked inside the walls Frank built. Money doesn't grow on trees, I always taught Michael. But to them, I was just a tree they were waiting to chop down. The humiliation was a worse ache than the chest pressure. I remembered nights, back in my day, sitting at the machine stitching until my fingers bled to make sure Michael had his college textbooks. Now, he was looking at me like an old broken machine that needed retiring. I started thinking, am I going crazy? I stopped trusting my own body. If a little white pill was supposed to make me better, why did I always get 10 times worse the next day? Was I imagining it? Was I just too old to realize I was dying fast? I tried skipping a pill one morning. I pretended to swallow it, palmed it instead, and hid it in the pocket of my sewing apron. The next day, I was still tired, yes, 72 tired. But I didn't get that crushing exhaustion, that heavy, thick sweat that felt like a death signal. It was just a regular bad day, not a catastrophe. One day at a time, I told myself, trying to hold on to that small, terrifying observation, the Tuesday before the end of the month. I remember the date because Sarah had marked it on the calendar for the lawyer appointment. I was already feeling weak. I had taken the pill that morning because Michael watched me like a hawk. The heavy pressure was back, right in the center of my chest, mixed with that sickly, disoriented feeling. I sat on the hall bench, chilling, waiting for the nausea to pass. I heard them arguing. They thought I was asleep upstairs. They never argued loud, always hushed and urgent. They were standing by the back door, where Michael keeps the key to the lockbox. I pushed myself up slowly, every joint protesting, and crept toward the kitchen. The linoleum floor was cool under my slippered feet. I hid behind the pantry door, where I keep my flour and sugar, trying to keep my breathing shallow so they wouldn't hear me. Sarah's voice was sharp, low, like a rusty saw blade. "It's taking too long, Michael. The insurance adjuster called again. We need to close this deal quickly, or we lose the refinance window." I knew what the deal was. The house. My home. Michael groaned, a sound that always meant he was weak and scared, but his words made my blood turn to ice water. "Just give it time, Sarah. We're following the doctor's instructions exactly," he whispered. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to make sense of that. What doctor? The only medical instructions I had were for the blood pressure meds Michael locked away. Then came the words that cut the thread of my life right in half. "She's not eating much, and those symptoms. She won't last another week if we keep the routine." I froze there, standing between the oatmeal and the canned peaches. The nausea didn't matter anymore. The chest pressure vanished, replaced by a jolt of icy terror so pure it left me breathless. Doctor's instructions? Routine. I wasn't just old. I wasn't just sick. I was being managed. My fatigue, my sweats, the heavy sinking feeling I kept calling heartburn. They weren't just signs of a failing heart. They were the scheduled effects of whatever routine Michael was following. They weren't waiting for me to die naturally. They were making sure I got there on time for their paperwork. I pressed my trembling hand against my mild chest pressure. That small act of comforting myself was now an act of war. I realized with a sickening clarity that cut through the physical pain that my problem wasn't just illness. It was my own family, and someone was intentionally making sure the ticking clock ran out next week. I didn't know what they were doing, or how, but I knew, standing there in the dark kitchen, that Michael and Sarah were trying to kill me. That night, after I heard them, I didn't sleep. The cold that hit me wasn't from the air conditioning. It was the shock of knowing your own child is planning your funeral to pay off his mortgage. You live and learn, they say. But I was learning the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who want you gone. I lay there holding buttons tight. I had to change everything. Right then. The first step was stopping the poison. I started palming the pills every single morning Michael came over. I'd take the water, tilt my head back, and pretend to swallow. But the pill would go straight into the little pocket sewn into my sewing apron. He always watched, waiting for the bob of my Adam's apple. He never checked my mouth. He was too busy watching the clock. I was terrified he would find the pills. My heart hammered against my ribs every time I hid them, but the fear of dying in that miserable fake routine was stronger than the fear of getting caught. The pattern I had noticed before became crystal clear. If I took the pill, the next day was a catastrophe. The deep tiredness was so bad, I couldn't lift a pot of coffee. The cold sweats would start for no reason, making my nightgown cling to my skin. The chest pressure felt like I was wearing a corset made of lead. But when I skipped the pill, Even though I was still 72 years old and tired, the symptoms were just regular. No crushing exhaustion, no icy panic, just the usual aches. I was right. That white pill wasn't a vitamin. It was a ticking bomb. Michael noticed the change, even though I tried to look sick. He started getting nervous. "Mom, you seem a little better this morning," he said one Tuesday, looking at me with squinted eyes. I gave him my best imitation of a frail, coughing old lady. I deliberately dropped my reading glasses and mumbled something about the light hurting my eyes. "Oh no, dear. I think I'm just conserving energy now," I whispered, clutching the arm of my chair like I couldn't stand up. It's hard to tell one bad day from the next, really, but the heartburn is just awful. He nodded quickly, relieved. He didn't want me to get better. He just wanted me to stay on track, sick enough to sign the papers, but not so sick that he had to call an ambulance before Wednesday. Then Sarah called later that week. Her voice was too sweet. "Dorothy, Michael installed a camera today in the living room," she chirped. "Just a little thing, hidden in the bookshelf. We want to make sure you're safe, darling. If you fall, we want to know right away." I walked over and stared at the bookshelf. Right next to Frank's old pipe stand, a small black eye was staring back at me. They weren't checking if I fell. They were checking if I was moving too much, if I was looking too lively, if I was still taking their poison. The deadline was closing fast. Wednesday morning, the day they planned to get the house and my life insurance. I had to move, but I had to move silently. I needed help. I needed someone who understood medicine, but who Michael and Sarah would never suspect. My secret weapon lived right across Oak Street, tending her rose bushes. Ilara Jenkins was Greek, sharp as a tack, and a retired cardiac care unit nurse. Michael always treated her like she was just another nosy old woman who didn't know anything. Old habits die hard, but mine were about to save my life. I waited until Saturday afternoon. Michael and Sarah were at the house looking through my jewelry box, claiming they were organizing my valuables. I pretended to walk buttons. I shuffled out the front door, looking shaky and weak for the camera. When I got across the street, Ilara was trimming a huge red rose bush. "Ilara, honey," I wheezed, keeping my voice shaky. "Buttons has a terrible case of the zoomies. Can you hold him for a minute? I need to get back inside. I'm feeling faint." Ilara took the leash, her dark eyes looking straight at my face. She knew I wasn't just faint. She saw the clammy skin and the genuine tremor in my hands. "Of course, Dorothy. Go rest," she said softly. As I handed her the leash, I quickly slipped a small folded piece of paper and one of the palmed white pills into the pocket of her gardening apron. It was risky, but I had no other choice. The note was simple. It said, "These are the new vitamins Michael gives me. I feel worse after I take them. Chest pressure, cold sweats. He and Sarah are meeting a lawyer Wednesday. Please help me." I hurried back inside, putting on a show of exhaustion for the camera. Michael didn't even look up from the jewelry box. He just told me to lie down. 2 agonizing days passed. I kept taking the salt-rich foods Michael gave me, knowing they were counteracting the blood pressure medicine he had locked away, making my heart work harder. I kept acting sick. On Monday evening, just 48 hours before the lawyer appointment, Ilara knocked on the back door. She carried a small casserole dish, a perfect excuse. I let her in, my heart pounding. We stood in the kitchen, away from the living room camera. "Dorothy, that casserole is just for show," Ilara whispered, setting the dish down. Her face was tight with worry. "We need to talk, fast." She pulled out a small clear plastic baggie. Inside was the white pill I had given her, now cracked in half. "I called a retired colleague," Ilara explained. "We ran a quick check, Dorothy. This is not a vitamin. This is a powerful potassium-wasting diuretic." The words felt like a physical punch. I gripped the countertop, suddenly dizzy. "What does that mean, Ilara? Diuretic? That's for water, right?" "Yes, it drains water," Ilara said, her voice dropping lower. "But it also drains electrolytes, Dorothy. It drains the potassium from your body. Potassium is what makes your heart muscle contract smoothly. Think of it like the battery acid for your heart." She looked straight at me, her eyes furious. "The dosage here, Dorothy, is triple what anyone should take for mild blood pressure. It's a lethal dose, especially when taken every day." A wave of pure shaking horror washed over me. The chest pressure, the deep fatigue, the cold sweats. They weren't signs of my heart failing naturally. They were the precise effects of Michael's poison. "They are draining your battery, Dorothy," Ilara said, taking my trembling hand. "Severe potassium loss. Doctors call it hypokalemia. It doesn't just make you tired. It mimics a severe heart attack. The breathlessness, the nausea, the pressure you feel. It's all calculated." I started weeping silently, the tears falling onto the checkered kitchen floor. My son. My own flesh and blood. He was actively killing me, not just neglecting me. Ilara continued, her voice soft but urgent. "Michael knows you have high blood pressure. He knows a good doctor would give you a potassium-sparing diuretic to protect your heart. But he swapped it for this, the worst kind, to hasten the failure. He is driving your potassium down below the critical 3.0 mark." Over my dead body, I thought, the numbness of shock finally giving way to a searing, cold rage. The $600, $1,000 for the house and the insurance. It was all about money. The betrayal was monumental. I thought of every sacrifice, every late night at the Singer machine, every penny spent on his future. He wasn't weak. He was a monster hiding behind a pitiful face. "They've escalated the plan, Dorothy," Ilara warned. "The timeline is tight. If you go to the ER now, they stabilize you. But Michael is power of attorney, and he'll finish the job once you're home. We need proof, and we need you stable for Wednesday." "How can I get stable, Ilara?" I whispered, feeling the tremor in my chest. "If he keeps giving me the pills." "You keep pretending to take them," she instructed firmly. "And we start the countermeasure immediately. You have to fight the electrolyte loss and stabilize your blood pressure yourself." Ilara explained that Michael and Sarah thought they had all the power because they controlled the official medication. But they underestimated the power of simple, specific self-management. "Your blood pressure spikes are the biggest danger right now," Ilara said, pulling a laminated card from her pocket. "Every time you get stressed, when they visit, when you feel that crushing pressure, your BP is shooting way up, stressing that depleted heart. We have to control the spikes." She handed me the card. On it was a simple diagram, 4 sides. "This is the box breathing technique," she said. 4-4-4-4. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold the empty lungs for 4. Do it seated secretly. Do it for 2 full minutes anytime you feel the pressure or the panic. This is your lifeline, Dorothy." "Will that really help?" I asked, skeptical. I was a seamstress, not a yoga teacher. "It's not some fluffy exercise, Dorothy," Ilara insisted, her voice serious. "When done properly, this method stabilizes your vagus nerve. Clinically, we see patients instantly drop their systolic blood pressure, the top number, by 15 to 20 ma." I felt a surge of hope, a tiny bright thread of possibility. They took my medication, but they couldn't take my breath. You need to test it, Ilara commanded. She pulled a simple digital blood pressure cuff from the casserole dish. I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling the anxiety surge. I put the cuff on my arm. Beep, beep. The machine read, 165/100. Too high, Ilara murmured. Now do the breathing. 2 minutes. I closed my eyes. Inhale, 4 counts. Hold, 4 counts. Exhale, 4 counts. Wait, 4 counts. I focused only on the numbers, ignoring the camera, ignoring the house, ignoring Michael rummaging in the next room. I did it 6 times, controlling the panic with the rhythm. 2 minutes passed. I opened my eyes, feeling calmer, more centered. I put the cuff back on. Beep, beep. The new numbers flashed. 148/92. I stared at the monitor. It was 18 points lower on the top number, in 2 minutes, without a pill. A slow, empowering grin spread across my face. Michael thought he was so smart. He thought he could kill me with chemistry, but I could fight him with simple biology. You are stronger than you feel, Dorothy, Ilara whispered. Now food. You are potassium depleted. You need spinach, avocados, sweet potatoes. I'm dropping off a bag of groceries later. You must eat them secretly. You continue to look frail, but you start fighting inside. I spent the rest of Monday evening feeling like I had woken up from a 10-year sleep. The physical exhaustion was still there, but the crushing confusion was gone, replaced by focus. I had to collect proof. The house was riddled with surveillance, but Frank had bought me a sturdy, heavy-duty cassette recorder 20 years ago to record detailed pattern instructions for complex wedding dresses. It was old, bulky, and perfect because it didn't use Wi-Fi. I placed the recorder beneath a thick lace tablecloth in the dining room, right where Michael and Sarah liked to discuss their plans. I made sure it was running when Sarah called that evening to finalize Wednesday's meeting. The lawyer is ready. Sarah's voice, captured clearly on the tape, sounded giddy. Just a simple signing. Michael, you need to make sure she rests tonight. We don't want any complications. I know, Sarah. Michael's tired voice replied. I told her to stick to the vitamin routine and just sit still. If she has another episode, they might delay the signing. She won't last another episode, Michael, Sarah promised. Just keep the dosage steady until 10 a.m. Wednesday. I listened back to the recording, cold and meticulous. They planned to keep poisoning me right up until the last signature. I also took my phone, walked into the bathroom, and took a clear, time-stamped photo of the toxic pill bottle Michael had mistakenly left on the counter. The label was wrong, the dosage astronomical. Evidence collected. The next day, Tuesday, was dedicated to acting. I moved like a ghost. I ate Ilara's spinach salad in secret. I used the box breathing technique constantly, especially when I heard Michael's heavy footsteps coming near the living room camera. My blood pressure stayed stable around 145/90, still high, but a miracle compared to 165/100. Michael came that evening. He was smug. He brought the thick folder of documents. Mom, just look at these papers for tomorrow, he said, placing the folder heavily on the dining room table, right over my hidden recorder. It's the final asset transfer and the power of attorney form. Just review it so you know what you're signing. He left, confident I was too weak and confused to read a single word, let alone fight back. I waited 5 minutes. Then, I moved. I opened the folder. The documents confirmed everything. My name scratched out, his name written in. The house, The life insurance. I pulled out a small velvet pouch. It was the same pouch where I used to keep the thimbles Frank bought me from trips abroad. Now it was repurposed. I placed the photo of the wrong prescription inside. I put the cassette recording inside, and I took one of the palmed lethal white pills, the last one I had saved, and dropped it inside too. This wasn't about thimbles anymore. This was about justice. I secured the pouch deep inside the lining of my old Singer sewing machine case, the one place I knew they would never look, thinking it was just a pile of dusty patterns. I sat back, leaning my head against the chair, putting my hands over my chest. The pressure was mild, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I was still Dorothy May, the seamstress who measured twice and cut once. I was setting a trap, and they were walking right into the pattern. I practiced the 4-4-4-4 breathing until the clock ticked past midnight. At 9:55 a.m. on Wednesday morning, Michael and Sarah walked through my front door. They were wearing expensive funereal black clothes, and their smiles were tight with poorly concealed anticipation. Sarah carried the financial documents like a victory flag. "We just need you to sign, Mom," Michael said, pushing the pen toward my trembling hand. He didn't notice the steadiness of my gaze. "It's all taken care of." I looked up at Sarah. She leaned in close, smiling a cold, proprietary smile, eager to watch the pen hit the paper. "It is taken care of," I whispered, my voice sounding weak, just as they expected. As Sarah reached across the table, ready to guide my hand to the signature line, I didn't sign the document. Instead, I lifted the small velvet pouch from my lap and slowly, deliberately, dumped its contents onto the pristine white asset transfer form. The recording of Sarah's conspiracy, the photograph of the intentionally switched prescription, and the single, lethal diuretic pill. "Before I sign over the house," I said, my voice growing stronger with every breath I took, "let's first discuss the $150,000 in life insurance you thought you already had. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story will travel." Wednesday morning, 10 minutes past 10 o'clock. The small dining room of my house on Oak Street felt suddenly claustrophobic. Michael and Sarah were frozen, staring at the small pile of evidence scattered across the asset transfer papers. Their expensive black funeral clothes now seemed a grotesque mockery of reality. Michael's face was the color of unbleached muslin. The front door, which I had left intentionally unlatched, opened slowly. First came Detective Harrison, a large man from the Houston Financial Crimes Unit, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Bringing up the rear, looking both fierce and elegant, was Ilara Jenkins, my neighbor. She carried a thick manila envelope, not a casserole dish. Michael stumbled backward, the polished veneer of his ambition instantly cracking. "Mother! What is this? Who are these people?" He stammered, gesturing frantically at the officers. Sarah lunged for the small white pill on the table, but Detective Harrison's hand shot out, stopping her wrist before she could touch it. I, Dorothy May, who had shuffled into the room looking like a victim of advanced heart failure, suddenly pushed my chair back with a decisive scrape. I stood up straight. I had spent 2 minutes just before they arrived stabilizing my vagus nerve with the controlled breathing, and now the calm was absolute. My chest, which had felt like lead for months, was clear. I walked around the table, not shuffling, but walking with the firm step of a woman who knows exactly where she is going. I looked directly at Michael. His eyes were wide with a terror he couldn't hide. My gaze was steady, cold, and utterly detached. I put the old bulky cassette recorder beside the pill. I reached out and pressed the play button. The small whirring sound of the tape rolling filled the silent room. Sarah's voice, sharp and high, echoed off the china cabinet. "It's taking too long, Michael." The insurance adjuster called again. "We need to close this deal quickly, or we lose the refinance window." Then Michael's mournful groan, followed by the chilling words. "She won't last another episode, Michael. Just keep the dosage steady until 10 a.m. Wednesday." A collective gasp went through the officers. Michael opened his mouth trying to object, but I cut him off. "Silence!" I commanded, my voice firm. The tape speaks for itself. They were planning my death to coincide precisely with the closing of their refinance window. I continued, opening the thick folder of documents. I retrieved the clear, time-stamped photograph I had taken in the bathroom. I slid it across the table toward Detective Harrison. "The second piece of evidence," I stated. "The pill you see on the table, Detective, is a powerful, potassium-wasting diuretic. The photo shows the bottle Michael left out. The prescribed dosage is triple the strength suitable for mild hypertension. Not a vitamin, but poison administered daily, calculated to drain the electrolytes necessary for my heart to function." Michael finally found his voice, high-pitched and strained. "It was a mistake. I mixed up the bottles. Mom, you know I'm terrible with medication. I was trying to help." "You weren't trying to help, Michael," I said, leaning over the table, my voice dropping dangerously low. "You were trying to collect $300,000 of equity in this house and $150,000 from my life insurance. That is 450,000 reasons why you conveniently mixed up my potassium-sparing medication for a lethal cardiac depressant." Ilara stepped forward, placing her manila envelope on the table. Inside were the lab results and a medical affidavit. "Dorothy was diagnosed with severe hypokalemia, critically low potassium," Ilara explained to the detective. "The persistent chest pressure and fatigue she experienced weren't general aging. They were the symptoms of a heart driven to failure. 2 months ago, her blood pressure was unstable at 165/100. The stress of your visits, Michael, often drove it even higher, risking an immediate attack." Ilara fixed Michael with a gaze of absolute contempt. But Michael and Sarah underestimated Dorothy's quiet determination. They saw me, her neighbor, only as a distraction. They did not realize that I taught her to fight their slow-motion poisoning. I took a moment, letting the silence hang. Then I placed my hand on my chest, remembering the icy panic I used to feel. "They thought they had control of my chemistry, Detective," I stated. "They knew a BP spike could kill me quickly. But Ilara taught me the box-breathing technique. 4-4-4-4. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Every time I felt that pressure, every time I felt the panic rising, I stabilized my vagus nerve. I managed my own blood pressure. I brought it down 18 points in 2 minutes, from 165/100 to 148/92, right in my own kitchen." I paused, and my final number was a quiet statement of victory. "Today, after 2 days of electrolyte repair and constant controlled breathing, my blood pressure is 135/85. I am healthy enough to watch you sign the arrest warrant." Michael suddenly surged forward, knocking his chair over. He looked wild, tears streaming down his face, the picture of a desperate child. "Mom! Stop this, please. I am your son. We are family." "You are going to send me to prison over a mistake? Think about my career, Mom. Think about what this will do to me," he shrieked, appealing to the last shred of maternal instinct he thought I possessed. "I made a terrible mistake, but I'm your only son. Please, just give us a second chance." I looked at him and saw not the child I raised, but the predator who had carefully calculated my demise. I did not blink. My voice was low, firm, and entirely devoid of sorrow, like the snap of a thread that had been pulled too tight. I spent 40 years sitting at that Singer machine, stitching until my fingers bled to make sure you had everything you needed. You took that loyalty, Michael, and you tried to pay me back with a death sentence. You systematically drained the life out of me with a diuretic, day after day, expecting $450,000 to be enough to justify murder. I finished, looking him straight in the eyes. My son died the moment he put a price tag on my life. You are just a criminal, Michael. I don't know you. Detective Harrison stepped forward immediately, cutting off any further pleas. He placed Michael's arms behind his back. Michael Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit attempted murder and aggravated fraud against an elderly person. Sarah started screaming, denying everything, but an officer quickly restrained her. She too was read her rights and led away, still babbling about the lost refinance window. As they were escorted out of the house, the silence that fell was thick and profound. The house was quiet, no longer filled with the heavy pressure of their presence. Ilara and I watched the police cars pull away. The official who had accompanied the lawyer quickly stamped the power of attorney documents and the asset transfer forms with a large red null and void. The house was mine again. My life was mine again. Michael Vance was subsequently sentenced to 15 years in federal prison in a minimum security facility for attempted murder and elder fraud. The systematic nature of the poisoning, the clear financial motivation tied to the refinancing deadline, and the evidence of the surveillance camera proved irrefutable. Sarah Vance, his accomplice, received 9 years. Michael's license to practice as an investment banker was permanently revoked by the state of Texas, and his professional reputation evaporated entirely. They were collectively ordered to pay a staggering $700,000 in restitution for medical costs and punitive damages. The shame extended beyond the law. Frank's remaining family, including Michael's own aunt and cousins, formally cut all ties with him and Sarah. They sent me letters of apology, expressing repulsion at the calculated betrayal. Michael and Sarah, isolated and stripped of their professional careers, became a cautionary tale in the community. They serve their time alone. Neither receives family visits. I, Dorothy May, at the age of 74, 2 years after that dreadful Wednesday, was declared fully recovered by my doctor. My health had stabilized dramatically. My blood pressure, which had hovered dangerously at 165/100, now averaged a completely healthy 125/82. I no longer required medication for hypertension. I had shed 12 pounds of accumulated fluid and stress weight. I sold the large house on Oak Street. It held too many memories, both good and terrible. I used the proceeds and a portion of the restitution funds to found the Singer Seam Initiative, named after the machine that provided for my whole life. It wasn't an organization run by suits and lawyers. It was a community resource. Ilara Jenkins became my co-founder and lead technical consultant. We set up the initiative in a small commercial unit near the local senior center. Our purpose was simple: to teach specific, physiological self-management tools to other vulnerable seniors, focusing on the very methods Michael tried to suppress. I now lead weekly workshops. I teach hundreds of seniors the specific 4-4-4-4 box breathing rhythm. I show them, using a simple digital cuff, how they can drop their systolic pressure by 15 to 20 mmHg in less than 2 minutes, giving them the presence of mind and the physical time necessary to call for help during a medical crisis. I emphasize that they are not weak, but strong enough to fight back with just their breath. We expanded the program to include nutritional advice focused on potassium retention, sharing recipes for easy, electrolyte-rich meals. We partner with local charities to deliver groceries to those most vulnerable. In the last 2 years, the Singer Seam Initiative has directly trained over 800 people in self-stabilization, turning confused victims into informed survivors. I bought a beautiful small apartment nearby, with a porch where buttons can sunbathe. I still use the small velvet pouch, not to hide poisons, but to carry the key to the initiative's office. Sometimes when I am teaching a class and watching an elderly woman bring her own pressure down with the controlled rhythm of her breath, I remember Michael and Sarah. They sought to bury me to secure $450,000, convinced my life was measured only by the profit of my death. They failed. The house is sold. The money is gone. The life insurance policy remains untouched, and the criminals are behind bars. But I am here, vibrant and purposeful. They tried to steal my final breath. Instead, they taught me exactly how to breathe correctly for the rest of my life. I close my eyes now, not in fear, but in concentration. The air moves in. 4 counts. It holds. 4 counts. It moves out. 4 counts. The vacuum holds. 4 counts. The silence is profound. The pressure gone. The vengeance most complete, I have learned, is the one that is achieved not with shouting or violence, but with a quiet, steady heart, a clear mind, and the knowledge that I alone control the rhythm of my own breath. And if you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the story and what kinds of stories you'd like to read more of. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next emotional story.